Our next speaker is Jan de Graaf, and his talk is entitled Managing Data Flows in a Research Hospital. Take it away.
Yeah. Yes. Good day, everyone. Today I'm going to talk how we at the NKI manage the data flows within a research hospital. So basically, how to do managed research data management with IRODs. We're the Netherlands Cancer Institute, and the Netherlands Cancer Institute comprises an international acclaimed research institute as well as a cancer clinic, and this combination assures us a rapid translation from basic research into clinical applications. So yeah, our motto is today's research is tomorrow's cure. And yeah, this just basically as a bit of an introduction. We believe that cancer doesn't have to be a deadly disease. Our researchers and doctors are highly motivated to make this vision a reality by unraveling the biology of cancer and using this knowledge to improve the prospects of cancer patients. They conduct innovative and excellent fundamental, translational, and clinical research through close collaboration between lab and clinic. And thus we create maximum impact of cancer patients. And there's also the challenge. We are a research institute and a hospital providing care. That makes us very strong, but is also very challenging in the perspective of managing all the data. So if we look at our challenge at the NQ, what we all written in the abstract, we have a heavy demand of data storage and data management, and they're evolving rapidly. So the parts in our institute are increasingly integrate the data acquisition and analysis and interdisciplinary research projects. So we're working more and more together. We have to do with regulation, nationally, internationally. We have to make data fair. Everybody knows that term. And we have a lot of development on the omics techniques. And massively increase size of the data that we acquire. Also, after analysis, data should be archived for long periods of times by law and regulations. And yeah, how do we store the data without wasting our resources and thereby money? And all these developments necessitate a meta-driven data management solution. So as you can see at our slides, there are RDM tools available. Yeah, it's just like the Windows Explorer or a Mac Finder and a bunch of files. Then if you look at the data production, the red line, it's going up, but the storage and backup capacity, the blue lines, are lagging behind. And yeah, cost and budget to keep up with the red line is driving the investments sky high. And then, because we're a research hospital and a care institute, the data interaction between clinic and research, that's also a challenge. How do we do that on a safe way? The research data, and storage challenges on that way. We see the digital era is well underway. It's been happening in a long time. So more and more data is being generated. So the size, but also the number of data is increasing. And the data is increasing data on itself. So it's fueling itself. So it's becoming more and more exponential. Then the question, how do we keep the data findable and thereby reusable? And also, by regulation, we have to make data reusable. So it's not a matter of wanting, but we have to. Where do we put the data? At what cost? And is the data safeguarded? And again, can we find the data? And then how do we share the data? Not only internally, but also externally. And again, the data production, that's the main driver within the NKI. The production is increasing just rapidly and going sky high. Then if you look at the data from a research perspective, RDM, it's just not a priority for the researcher. They just want to store data. And research data management, manual, or it's just a distraction from research, just causing them a headache. Thereby, data is not or poorly structured and described. So finding the data is hard. It even gets lost. Not really lost, but they just can't find it anymore. How do you know that you have the correct data? And yeah, the poor to no insight in the lineage of data. So where got this data come from? What generated this data? How do we come to this data? Which leads to the second bullet, the research outcome and reproducibility. Yeah, can you reproduce your research if you don't know if your data is trusted? Can you trust your data? Then again, how do we share data? And data automation is hard at the moment. So yeah, to sum up, looking at the facts of data, we see that the data production and growth is becoming exponential. We also see that data is never deleted. They just don't, researchers just don't want to delete the data because we might need it. We've seen also, at least at our institute, we see a big difference between the research groups themselves and the research facilities. We see that research facilities here in our institutes produce the data, and the groups are using that data. That might be unique for our institute, but that gives us also an opportunity. At the data itself, and we see that also in other institutes, a large sum of the data, and at our institute at least 80%, is not being used anymore. That's what we call cold data. And we see out of the statistics of our data, that data becomes cold after at least 6 months, and sometimes sooner. So that also gives us an opportunity. And yeah, so the question that when we got to these statistics, why do we keep all that old data on expensive online storage? And if it's on storage, it's also taken into the backup. So it also consumes a lot of space in the daily operational backup. And we had really cases that research groups just couldn't find their data anymore. It's not that it wasn't there anymore, they just could not find it anymore. What's the solution? Well, we stumbled on iRods a few years ago, and we looked what iRods could do, and we saw that iRods had a tiering plugin, which was already mentioned before in the technology update. And what we saw is that gave us the opportunity and the possibility to do storage tiering. So what we thought of, well, what if we introduce several storage tiers? So we have very fast storage at the facility, which is costly. We don't have that much, but it's very fast and very accessible. Then we have the central storage of the central IT. That's a bit slower, but also a bit cheaper. We have a bit more. And then we as an institute, we can use, even for our clinical data, we can use Microsoft Azure to store data. Even our patient data can sit there. So we can use that as an archive pool for our storage. So that's relatively cheap. And we have an infinite amount of that storage as long as we pay. So that gives us the opportunity. So the red line is the data production. The blue line is the storage capacity. And you see that the gray and the dark blue line drop because we can scale back on the operational storage and the backup capacity. And we increase on the archive capacity because there the growth is, we saw. So we have managed storage based on lifetime and usage because all the storage tiering is being done on data policy, which are metadata driven. Thereby, we can implement storage at the correct location and store the data where it's needed, online and an archive. The data archiving is automated, so it's flexible and transparent for the end user. IROTs will move data back and forth just based on rules and metadata tags, etc. So when a user needs data, IROTs will take care of that. We can annotate data with metadata so it can be found, and we have a lot of APIs to make the data accessible with IROTs. Then we had to pursue management. And so we had to make a business case and what are the financial savings. So we did a calculation on all our institute data. And this is now from 2 years back, these calculations. But we see that our local storage will cost around 200 euros per terabyte per year. And the archive cost in Azure, geo-redundant, so on 2 locations in West and North Europe, is then 30 euros per terabyte. So if you then do the calculation on 80% of your data is data that should belong in an archive versus we keep it online, well, you can do a quick calculation and we have very detailed numbers. But for our institute, that came on a yearly savings of around 375,000 euros on a yearly basis, just because we can downscale the online storage operation. So basically, IROTs, the business case is by correctly scaling and managing the storage, financial investments in the ITs are reduced, and we can spend that money on research. So we can shift the budgets around. And yeah, this was the eye opener for management, why we should do research. It just saves a lot of money. So we came up with a research data management infrastructure for the bioimaging facility. We started with a facility because they produce data and they manage the data, and the bioimaging facility was already a facility that had their data management facility at a proper level. So what we did in the facility, we ingest a solution, a research data management solutions with centrally storage tiering in place with several tiers, with data coming from all the equipment. Through the data management solution, we can share the data with the strong servers, with the researchers, and we used not only our IROTs, but also Mango as a web portal, Agendo for reservation monitoring, and LabGuru as an electronic lab journal. So that's basically the solution that we ingested into the local facility. And therefore, data is local, available on a high speed and local storage, and we can do the local compute at high speeds. If we look at the data flow at this facility, but basically on the general level of all the facilities within the NKI, we see that we have just basic steps. We produce data, we ingest data, we describe data, we store the data, we are finding the data, and use and share the data. So the researcher produces data, and we describe, store, etc. With other applications, and make all that to our normal applications that all the users use available. If we look at the facility process, we can see that IROTS is in the middle of all these operations, and we can describe the data with all kinds of API calls during the ingestion process, and we store it in the Azure part. The technical flow, we can see that we ingest the data, we use the HardLake plugin, and we use the tiering module and the WebDAV and the Python API to access data and move all the data automatically through all the tiers. For the end user, we have web user interfaces, Agenda for the reservation, and Mango for finding the data, to Google on your data. And this option also helps us to expand to other facilities at various and very easy. Just copy paste the solution of the bioimaging to other facilities because we have more or less the same process on each facility. Then we have the clinical and the pathology. This is where the integration with the clinic takes place. We have the pathology department. They scan slides, and the same slides are scanned also at the research facility for research purposes. So they're scanned and stored twice, and there's no data carryover. It's a lot of manual work. There's no digital archive, and the complexity is that the networks are separated for safety. The desired situation is that we can all share that and exchange data, and the solution is there that we can use IROTs for that, for safe data transfer, auditability, etc. So the solution for us was very simple. Just treat the pathology data as a facility, copy paste this solution, and within 1 week, we had this solution up and running with the pathology in a safe way, totally checked also by the information security officers, etc. We do all legislation, all processes, and we can exchange data with IROTs between the clinic and the research. And if you look at that flow, we see the same flow that we saw before with a few adjustments, but basically the same way how we can then move data from the clinic into IROTs in a managed ways and make it available for AI processing that we do in Microsoft Azure. This is basically our network setup. It's also not that complicated. Just a bunch of servers, storage nodes, etc., and a link with Azure. And in the end, yeah, some numbers. We have total 4 departments, 4 operational departments, the bioimaging and the clinical pathology. We have 2 facilities that we archive data for. They don't use IROTs, but we use it for an archive. We have 23 million files, 270 terabytes of data into IROTs. 160 terabytes is already into archive, and the rest is counting. We have 52 million metadata points, and our database size currently is 150 gigabytes. We have 7 servers, 4 API interfaces, and data access API interfaces. We have 3 of them. So yeah, that basically sums up how we use IROTs at the NKI, also even with clinical data.
All right. Thanks, Jan. Do we have any questions from the room? We do have a question.
Hi, this is Alan. Sorry if this is a naive question, but I was curious how you define data being cold. You said it goes cold after about 6 months, maybe sooner. I was just curious if you could elaborate on that a little bit.
Yeah, basically we monitor the access time in there is very relevant. That's the main driver. So yeah, it's very arbitrary. If data hasn't been touched for 6 months, then we move to archive as a basic rule.
Do you only have 2 tiers, or are there more than 2 tiers?
Depends a bit of the data, but basically we have 3 tiers, and for the raw data from the facilities, we go directly from tier 0 to the archive tier. And for the project data where people are working on, the data is being tiered between tier 0 and tier 1. And when the project is done, then the data is moved to tier 2 to the archive tier. That's basically how it works. So yeah, we have a limited set of tiers currently.
I think we have a couple questions in Slack.
Okay, one question is certain data you have to save for a minimum of time. You mentioned 10 years, but do you delete afterwards after the archive? Is there a strategy for that?
Yeah, basically, it's legislation where we have to keep data, and then after 10, 15 years, depending on legislation that we have to follow, data either is carried over to the responsible person, and he has to, we extract the data and hand it off, and then we delete it, or when there's no handoff, yeah, the data is removed. So basically, yeah, we remove the data unless there's another use for data.
All right. Thank you, Jan. Oh, we have a question.
Hi, I'm Jenna from UNC and I work with research data preservation in universities, so it's a little bit different from hospitals. And while I looked into your workflow, I noticed that there is no sign of sharing data. So do you plan to have that in your workflow, or is it not a really important feature in hospitals?
Well, we share the data between the clinic and the research, so that's one part of sharing. That's internal sharing, and through the project structure, we can share data between groups, etc., and facilities. And the external sharing, that's one bullet point on the agenda for in the long term. So first, want to have it working internally, and then we're gonna take a look at how can we share data also externally. So how can we federate data? But that's on the long-term agenda.